Hello, welcome to another Cup of Joe. I'm your host, Joe Tumalo, CEO of PG Partner. Super excited. I always say that with every guest, but we've just recorded one of the, I think, I'm sure, the most unique and interesting Cup of Joes with my guest, Lisa Greer. Actually, we recorded two. It's two parts. And Lisa has the unique way about her experience, way of being, in that she is both a fundraising expert. She's got a couple books, which we'll talk about, and a philanthropist. Her and her husband are major gift donors. So she brings a lot of what we talk about in these two Cup of Joes are from her perspective as a donor and how we as gift officers, fundraisers, should be communicating with our donors. Really, the second one's a little longer, but worth the time. A lot of really good content. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Very excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about your uniqueness, what you bring to the table that most people don't have. And that is your experience and role and expertise as a philanthropist and a fundraiser, right? And fundraising expert.
Right, exactly. It's very novel, and I'm surprised more people aren't doing it, but there we are. So
Why are you doing it? Why? Like,
well,
why did you, get into
yeah,
the.
well, I talk about this in my book as well, that when I came into wealth about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and started giving, I realized that coming from business, that this was an industry that was a lot of things that they did, a lot of the systems and the processes and the tactics seemed to be very archaic to me, and they weren't resonating, and I didn't think they'd resonate for my kids or my friends or anybody else. And then I started worrying about nonprofits. I had been involved in on boards of community foundations and nonprofits and all sorts of different places. And I thought, a whole bunch of organizations are going to go out of business if someone doesn't turn this around. So I I don't even think it's their fault. I think that in my case, I was looking at one of the big foundations here in Los Angeles that funds, as many foundations do, funds other kind of conglomerates who then fund smaller nonprofits, and then they might fund smaller nonprofits, right? I mean, they could be regranting organizations or not, but there's a lot of those that go on. And I thought, those guys down at the end of the row, they will just all of a sudden find out you're not getting a check this month, and then they're gone. And it's a horrible thing for the people there. It's a horrible thing for the world. And it's also a horrible thing for donors, because there's donors who've put money into those organizations saying, I want it to do good. But it's like a point of no return when that check that they've depended on, or two checks, just all of a sudden don't come anymore. So I decided that someone needed to do something. And I realized at that point, I didn't really need to work anymore. I had always worked my whole life, and corporate and as an entrepreneur. And I said, I see the problem, and other people, for some unknown reason, don't seem to see the problem and see it coming down the pike. And so I have an obligation then to do what I can to fix it. So that's what I do.
Right. And so we're going to do this in a two-part series. What do you think about part one being for smaller, mid-sized nonprofits, and then part two being for larger, more well-established? Think that's a good way to.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. So part one for the smaller folks, I just had a call today with a small organization. They're trying to build, maybe do a campaign. And, the number one complaint is the board.
Yep.
And I don't know, do you know my friend Brian Saber, Asking Matters?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'll connect you with him, but
Thank
he's
you.
a great author, a really interesting guy. And he really has a good perspective. He says, don't stop asking your board members to call all their friends and ask for a check.
I totally agree.
Right, because, and I know, and maybe like a personal, when I do my personal fundraising outside of work, going to friends and family, I just, even though all day long I talk to donors, but it's less personal, right? It's more my role as a fundraiser versus, hey,
Yeah.
my buddy Rich, can you, would you take a look at that? This feels so awkward. So with the board and fundraising, how do we get especially for these small organizations, how do we get them, right? I hear it all the time. Not everybody's giving. Do we have a minimum? Thoughts on,
Yeah.
on how to,
Yeah, I just joined a new board recently in the last few months, and I just had this conversation with them day before yesterday, actually. And it was exactly the way you just described it. They have a small board. They've only been around for about 3 years. The board is not someone described it to me the other day as not a working board, but I think a working board and a give-get board aren't necessarily the same thing. But they said, like, these people bring other things. We don't feel comfortable asking them for money. Their ask was, give us something, but in fact, I got an email from them, give us something, make a board donation, a board gift, and it can be anything. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So what should it be? And I thought, well, I don't want to be the chump who gives way more than everybody else. So I have a story about that in my first book where all of a sudden I'm the top donor, and I had just started and I didn't know what to do. So anyway, I said, well, there's nothing wrong with having board members contribute. And it really is a pet peeve of mine saying that people, oh, they don't have money, they can't give money. Everybody can give something. I believe more in the give or get. I think some people, for some people, it doesn't really, I don't think it really matters which one you do. Give and get is nice, and I've been pushed to do that before. I do think that board members need to be told, and this is another question that came up with this organization, I think board members need to be told upfront what that obligation is. And so they asked me the other day, well, if all of a sudden we're putting that in and the board members are already there, we don't want them to get mad and leave because they've now been asked for money. So what am I supposed to do? And I said, well, you can have the board as a group make that decision, and you don't have people grandfathered in. You just say, this is what it is. And if the board decides that that's what it's going to be for new members, then that's what it should be for themselves as well. So if the board says, no, we don't want to do that, then you have to think about and explain to the board, what does that mean for the organization? Obviously, most people have heard the thing about grants and foundations want to see that there's 100% participation. I, as a donor, don't often believe that. I feel like that's just something people are saying to get me to give money. I think it is true in some cases. But here's the thing. So the reason why I don't have a problem with the give or get is because most people, a lot of people have money and a lot of people have contacts. And this is back to that, what is it? Time, talent, treasure, and adding ties and testimony. This is the ties and testimony. So if I say to someone on a board, and this is what I do when I help boards, if you have money and you would like to give the money and you don't want to ask somebody else, that's great. Then you can give us. This is what the minimum is. Let's say the minimum is $5,000 a year. That's fine. If you feel uncomfortable about it, if you feel like that's not something that you can, your budget affords, you could say it in a nice way, you can help us. Your contribution can be just as important and it's not about asking friends and twisting their arm. So do you want to guess what I'm going to say, or do you want me to just tell you?
You tell me.
So it's super, super simple. And I don't know why more people don't do it. You just send an email. You just say to them, it's not, give me your list. You're honored at something. Give me your entire mailing list and sit down with me and write little notes on cards. And I think that's might work for some people. It certainly doesn't work for people like me. But all you do is you do an introduction. You just say, this is something that I give to. I am, they don't need to know how much you give. This is an organization I'm on the board of. I think they do great work. I find them wonderful because A, B, C, and D, or just a very short, you can even just say, I find that they do great work. That's why I'm on the board. And then you can say, can I introduce you to them? So that you can at least just find out more about the organization. And if it was said to me, I will do that every single time. I will follow up. If a friend or a colleague says, it's not asking for money, it's just, can they just tell you about it? And the best wording for that is, can I introduce you to see, and you can have a conversation with them to see if there's a fit. There may or may not be a fit here. And that's it. And then people know, well, it's the same thing as when people are looking for jobs and they say they're going, what do they call it? They're doing informational sessions with people, right? So people do that all the time when they're looking for a job or a new career. And how do they get into those informational sessions? Usually from a referral. So we're just doing the same thing. And people will, when I see something that has a friend's name on it, or even someone who's a colleague or who I respect, or maybe if I don't even know them very well, but if I know them a little bit, I will always take that call or do that. Now, sometimes I don't even ask the question. I just tell somebody, just send the email and say, Lisa, I'm sending this because Lisa referred me to you because she thought this might be something of interest. And then you just skip a step. And in those cases, I am not going to let down my friend. I don't want to, besides, unless I don't like that person, I don't want to hear the end of it. So it's easier for me to just go and have the conversation. And if you say we're just seeing if there's a fit with your objectives or whatever, you have to say something that's the opposite of, I heard you have money from your friend and I want that money now. It can't sound like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I often say to donors, we've talked, all my work now is fractional work, calling donors, do a lot in healthcare, what we call grateful patients, where we're calling supposedly wealthy patients who have not made any donations yet. That they're not always the case, but right. And sometimes I'll say, you need to feel good about it. If you have enough connection and affinity for us and the work we do, would you feel good about a conversation around taking a look at what we're doing and seeing if that matches your charitable giving interests, your preferences?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and you can even say the more casual version, which is that something that you and your family are into? Is that something that you enjoy? And if it's not, here's the one thing that you can say that works beautifully, and people rarely do it, which is that you also can say to somebody, if it's not a fit, and I will at least get to know you and understand what your interests are, and I can refer you to other organizations that you actually might be interested in. Nice. And when you say that, everybody kind of stops and thinks, oh my God, they're not really here just for my money. This is not a get the check and go kind of thing. And when you make that referral to another organization, most of the time they'll give you money because they can't believe that a fundraiser will actually do that. It's a really great deal. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. That's beautiful. And then as we wrap up this part one, as far as, let's say, we're a small shop, we have executive director does some fundraising. We have one director of development doing most of the frontline fundraising. Something that I'm always working on is, I'm not pushy, right? You need to feel good about doing more. And another thing I say often is, if we can give you a compelling reason to do more, how would you feel around a conversation around that? Would you be open to a conversation around ways to do more, whether that's outright or deferred gifts?
Can I comment on that?
Please.
So the do more is confusing to donors. Okay. I don't know what you mean. So you have to say to support us financially, or to participate financially. You don't have to say give me money, but if you say I'm looking for financial support, because I, as a donor, and most donors, especially newer donors, when you say, would you like to support the organization? It's like someone's just trying to give me code and I'm supposed to understand it. I don't automatically understand that you mean financially. I think you might be coming to me because you want a referral to whatever, an event producer, or to a lawyer, or to
volunteer,
like that, or a volunteer. I don't know which one you're asking me for. So this sort of beating around the bush thing about, well, I'm going to use words that make it easier for you to say yes. Just tell me the truth. And it's the same works for telling donors both the good and bad of your organization. If you just say everything's awesome except that we need money, no one's going to believe you, because donors aren't dumb. Most people are not dumb. So they just won't trust you then. But if you say to them point blank, and I go one step further, I'll say, we'd like to have a meeting with you to discuss your financially supporting this organization, or your financial support of. And then they understand what you mean. But I'm telling you, support, it can mean 3 different things or more.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not only is our audience learning, but I'm learning. Thank you so much. But I always say I'm the eternal student, always looking to improve. That's awesome. So End of part one. Thank you. You have a new book out. You have a copy there by chance? You can show us.
Here's my new book. Oops.
Oh, okay. That's a new one. All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I thought that was an older one.
Yeah,
Awesome.
this is
Potential
the new
fund.
one. The old one is called Philanthropy Revolution, and it's a
Yes.
hardcover. Well, it's in hardcover and softcover, and it's you'll see it if you look at Amazon. They'll be promoting both of them, but it's more of my story of how I got into this and why, in more detail, and things that happened along the way. And the new book is really meant to be not read front to back immediately, but to be where you look up a chapter when you want to sort of be instantly educated about something like donor advised funds or something that you don't feel comfortable discussing.
Great. And how can people get in touch with you, Lisa?
I'm at lisagreer.com, or just go to my website, which is lisagreer.com, lisagreer.com. And you can subscribe to my newsletters and tips of the week and find out about the books and where I'm speaking and all of that.
Wonderful. Lisa, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And come on back, folks, for part 2. Thank you for being here.